So the Boks ended the year with a disappointing defeat against Wales, and Ryan, perhaps we didn't call it last weekend. We expected the Boks to be a lot better in their final game of the year, losing to Wales and finishing with a 50% win-loss record. But perhaps in some way it's actually quite aptly surmised a year that was quite up and down and quite inconsistent from the Boks, where we saw glimpses of what they were capable of, but then also were frustrated with elements of underperformance. And that was clearly the case, in Cardiff, where they failed to really get up for the final game of the year, despite picking their strongest available team. And it was a really strange performance and a really disappointing way to end the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think 50% kind of reflects where this team is at. The loss in Wales, even though both of us predicted that they would win there. Just speaking for myself, like that, it wasn't entirely surprising that they would lose this, just because of kind of where this team is at. This inconsistency is kind of inconsistent for a team in their first year under a new coach who's trying to implement a new tactical philosophy and trying to bring some structure and introducing some new players. So yeah, 50% is kind of a fair reflection of the year. But the performance in Cardiff was disappointing. It's kind of like all of the defeats this year. At no stage did they ever get played off the park. I mean, those 7 defeats, they've never ever gotten played off the park. And I think when Rassie reflects on those defeats, there's kind of like there's that nagging sense that it could have been so much better. But in the broader scheme of things, it's kind of consistent with the team, facing all of those types of challenges. Yeah.
And then I thought perhaps it's worth just looking at a few of the pros and cons that have come out of the Bok year over 2018. And for me, one of the real positives has just been the manner in which they've competed against the All Blacks. Nothing really separated the two teams. Obviously a great win in Wellington, the first time they won in New Zealand in 9 years. And then at Loftus, they were by far the better team over the first hour and really just capitulated in that final quarter. I think for the Boks, they'll take great heart out of the manner in which they've competed against the All Blacks and really reduced the gulf between the two teams. And then not only that, but also home and away against England. I think they proved that they had the better of that team as well, who started the year ranked number 2. So I think just moving into 2019, the way the Boks have performed against the All Blacks, England, two really top teams, I think that'll give them great cause for encouragement.
Yeah, I highlighted that as a positive as well. So definitely at the start of the year, I said that we needed to close that gulf that was between us and the All Blacks. And I think we managed that. Again, you're looking back at the Pretoria test, and Rassie's going to look back and regret that. I think the Springbok players would do as well, because to beat New Zealand twice in the same season has been unheard of in recent years for the Springboks. To beat them once in a year is unheard of for the Springboks in recent years. So they'll regret that, but they definitely closed the gap between themselves and the All Blacks. And then, you're coming out playing England 4 times in a year, and you're winning 2 of those and losing 2 of those. That last test year, again, that grates, man, because they just didn't show up for that one. Yeah. And so, yeah, definitely a big positive in that front. Yeah.
And then the other positive, I think, to look at is just the selections that Rassie Erasmus has made. And I think it's been a big improvement on the Alistair Coetzee era. Specifically looking at Peter Steph du Toit making his move to blindside flank from number 5. I think he's been probably the Boks' best player this year, or at least there or thereabouts. And not only him really embracing that role at 7, but looking at the guys who've come back from overseas, really vindicating Erasmus's backing of them. Particularly, I think Faf de Klerk answering really providing an answer at number 9. Billy Leroux answering a question at 15. 2 key positions where they've come in and done a great job. Beyond that, Dwayne Vermeulen adding leadership and experience at number 8, and then Cheslin Kolbe, I think probably one of the finds of the season, coming back from France and proving he's really capable of performing at test level. And then I think on the wing, probably an area where there were some question marks at the beginning of the year, but we've seen Rassie having to gamble on a couple of young players, and Aphiwe Deante's really stepped up, just been named the breakthrough player of the year, and Spoon Corsi's done really nicely as well.
Yeah, all this play has been great. For me, a nod to Rassie that, and I don't hold Alistair sort of accountable too much for the overseas Boks things. He could have been more forceful on that issue, but they just didn't give him I think, what he wanted and what he needed. Rassie has come in and clearly from the outset said that this is one of the criteria that they have to tick in order for him to take the job, and he's basically forced he's forced their hand in that regard, which is a good thing. You mentioned all of this players. For me, Francois Lowe coming back, and I said last week that he's a moments guy, and Springboks need moments guys, and that's Francois Lowe for me. And in a bit, I'll speak about the dilemma that Francois Lowe creates for Rassie as a negative, and how we go about solving that. But I agree with you on all of those guys. Deante for me is an outstanding player, X factor like we haven't seen in a long time. Leroux established that kind of solidity in the back three. And then a player that you haven't mentioned is Steven Kitshoff for me. I think the way he's played throughout the season has been exceptionally good. He's been so consistent. And when he's gone off after 60, there's definitely been a little bit of a dip in quality there, which is something we need to address. But for now, just celebrating Kitshoff.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point you make, and something that's worth considering going forward. Other than that, the third positive I think worth mentioning is just the clarity of the game plan that we've seen the Boks embracing. You know, Rasmus has really looked to empower the players and get them to take ownership of their specific roles and the tactical and technical side of the game. I've spoken to a lot of the Springbok players over the course of the year, and it really seems that they've enjoyed what Erasmus and the coaching staff have brought in terms of preparing them for each opponent and certain match situations. I just feel that there's a greater confidence that they're taking into matches where they know exactly what role they need to perform and what sort of tactics they're going to embrace. I think that's been a key area of evolution and something that will give them a lot of heart going into 2019.
Yeah, and we didn't discuss this beforehand, but I think what you're talking about is tactical identity. I've got it down as a positive as well, and we both said at the start of the year that it's imperative that the Boks develop a clear tactical identity, right? And for me, it was even more so encouraging that that tactical identity was rooted in pragmatism. And so when I speak about pragmatism, the criticism is always like, yeah, you play this bash and crash rugby, but it's not that. It's not that. The Boks' strength has always been laying the platform to earn the right to play in the wide channels. And I feel like when they do that, even when they've lost, when they've done that, very few teams have had a response to us. Sure, in times where they've been under pressure, they've reverted, I felt, to playing wide too soon without earning the right to do that. And you saw it in the Wales test. When they played wide early, Wales were waiting for them to turn over in the wide channels, as opposed to depleting the defensive line and then creating gaps in that defensive line out wide. But there's a clear tactical identity. The execution of that we can criticize and all of those things. But for me, it's so encouraging because over the last couple of years, and particularly under Coetzee, there was this ugly hybrid tactical philosophy that we had that irritated me. Yeah. But there's a clear game plan now, clear tactical philosophy, big plus for them.
Yeah, and then just moving forward to some of the negatives, or at least the things that they really want to work on going to that World Cup with limited time. And I think the defensive system that they're looking to enforce has come off at times, and it's been a potential positive. But I think just in this first year, we've seen clearly that there are teething problems in terms of that the rush and having the wingers coming in, making big decisions and having to make split-second calls, and young wingers, rookie wingers who are needing to learn. And I think the defence coach Jacques Nienaber, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned that generally you need for a defensive system, a new one at least, to be completely adjusted to. It takes 2 to 3 years, and they're looking obviously to compress that into 18 months at best. So it's an area that they need time, and it's got potential, but they have been exposed out wide on occasions, and they've been exposed there, and it's been a problem in a game or two. Yeah.
So you highlight the defensive system and the teething problems there, and so my one of the downsides for me is linked to that. So I alluded earlier on to speaking about Francois Lowe. So if you reflect on especially that 2010 season at the Stormers, Rassie was the high performance coordinator at the Stormers. Alistair Coetzee was the coach, but Rassie was pulling all of the strings there. Jacques Nienaber was the defensive coach at that time. His defensive system relies a lot on the opposition getting slow recycle ball and then trying to play from a platform that isn't really there. And so this is where Francois Lowe comes in for me. He's so effective at ensuring consistently slow ball for the opposition, which again ties in, like I say, to that defensive system where they press you from the outside and they create that suffocating umbrella type defense that tries to pressure you into doing something that's outside of your kind of tactical framework. So whether that being kicking at trying to grab over that rushing defensive line or whatever the case may be, but an action that plays into the Springboks' hands. And this is where the dilemma comes in for Rassie now. I think in the context of the defensive system you make reference to, Francois Lowe is absolutely critical. That raises the issue then of where does Sia play? And you mentioned Pierre-Steph du Toit earlier on having a breakthrough year, and I agree with you. Reminds me of a young Johan Smith, for example, and Sia's not going to play at 8 because Dwayne's going to play there. So how do you accommodate him? So he's kind of getting to that John Smith zone, right? When Bismarck was coming through and there was a better player available that could play in his position. Over the years you come to realize that John Smith was critical at the time because of what he brought as a captain and to the, just his presence in that dressing room, especially in the 2007 season when they won the World Cup. So you've got to see does he have that same aura? Does he have that same presence? And if he does, then he's worth playing over Francois Lowe. But if he doesn't, then you've got some hard questions to ask yourself. Because in the context of that defensive system, Francois Lowe is absolutely critical.
Yeah, no, those are very interesting points you make, and I think, like you mentioned, if Khaleesi's then playing, or if he's in a way kind of like a hybrid flanker, then you're asking Malcolm Marx or Dwayne Vermeulen to play a big role at slowing ball down, and then that's another element of workload that they've got to embrace. So it does bring up one thing has another knock-on effect to another. But I think just touching on, we mentioned defence, and I think looking at the Bok attack, it's definitely an area that they've looked to grow, they want to grow, but it's also not always come together. And I think their finishing in particular, while they are creating opportunities quite consistently, their finishing has left quite a lot to be desired. And I just think, I've looked at some of their figures, just if we're looking at how they finished off. 7 tries against England in that June series. It jumped to 21 tries in the Rugby Championship. I think they will be really pleased with that. Yeah. But then on the end of your tour, just 6 tries that they managed to pull off. So I think we've seen again that inconsistency we've spoken of, where it's been a bit up and down. They've created opportunities. Sometimes we've seen some really good tries, but quite often they haven't just had that clinical final touch. Perhaps that's got to do with the young players in the back line, but I think it also ties into their kicking game. And I think too often we've seen these kicks going up, often in the contestable kicking or the box kicking, just going a little bit too far or a little bit too short, instead of having that kind of 50-50 ball up in the air, allowing them to often win back possession and then kind of launch an attack from the counter. So I think their kicking game and certainly their finishing areas to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of similarities between this side and say the 2009 Springboks. And I use the 2009 Springboks as an example because their tactical kicking game was the cornerstone of their success, right? And yes, like they had my favorite Springbok of all time playing at scrum half for Dupree. And he was masterful as far as the tactical kicking was concerned. Morné Steyn was playing at fly half, a big strength of his as well. So Faf and Andre are not there, but it's a key point that you raise as well. And sorry, it's not only the kicker, it's the chaser and the contest in the air. And I feel like even Willie, who's diminutive in relative to some of the beasts playing Test rugby at this point, or Pure Dianti, but they're good in the air. So if they get that right, then it's a big strength for us. So I see a lot of similarities between those two sides, the 2009 Springboks and the 2018 Springboks, and hopefully the 2019 Springboks move closer to the predecessor of 10 years ago. So definitely, I'd like to see a stat about how much time they spent in the red zone, in the opposition red zone on this end of year tour. I'm guessing that it's going to be a high percentage of the game, but just converting the pressure into points is self-evidently a big issue. Again on Saturday against Wales, like you think they get there and they're gonna. I mean, there's just it's 1 or 2 moves away from scoring, and then they blow it. But in the same breath, a do better for 2019.
Yeah. So I think definitely the conversion rate we've spoken of, and then the one area for me, while I think we mentioned in previous discussions that the starting 15 has probably taken shape before the World Cup. I think Rassie knows even by now who's going to be that 15. But for me, the one area with a couple of question marks is probably the midfield, because we've seen Damian Dialende have one good performance and then one where he's relatively anonymous. He'll have a good game where he carries really well, and then another where it just seems like that's not happening for him. And then we've seen Lukhanyo Am show great potential, but then battle with injury, and then Jesse Kriel as well, a bit of inconsistency. But for me, Kriel offers a lot as a defensive organizer, and someone like that with experience and the communication ability, especially with a new defensive system, is really important. But I think it's probably 12-13. There's potential for a bit of growth and a bit more clarity that's needed, because it's lacked penetration at times on attack. That must be a bit of a concern, because unless that midfield combination is firing and really gelling, you're not going to launch a real go or a real shot at that World Cup. I think it's a key facet that they need to settle on quickly.
Yeah, I'm more worried about what they don't offer you on attack than what they offer you on defense, which I think is pretty solid. And I've said from the start that and look, I may be wrong. My opinion may be embarrassed, and I'd welcome that, because it means that the Springboks are doing really well. In terms of that midfield combination, they good Super Rugby players, and at that level, really good, really effective. The step up test level brings a whole range of new challenges again, and we're speaking in an attacking context now. I don't think Jesse Kriel and Damian Dialende are the answer from an attacking perspective. I've said before that I feel like our best combination there from an attacking perspective and very competent defensively would be Serfontein and Am. Am needs to stay fit and be given a run to show what he can do or what he can't do. But from what I've seen from those initial his initial appearances, he could be the guy for us. And in combination with a guy like Serfontein, I think even more so. So that's my preferred combination. And maybe we'll see them in 2019. I don't know. Serfontein also has his own injury issues, which he needs to kind of get over and find some form again to catch Rassie's eye. But for me, that's the combination. Dialende and Kriel playing off the bench in a World Cup context, sure. They offer you a lot, but as starters who you're looking to unlock opposition defense, especially elite defenses, not for me.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, thanks, Ryan. It has been a very interesting year and lots to talk about on the Boks front, but we'll have to see what they can offer in 2019. We can't forget there's a Barbarians game still to come this weekend, and a whole bunch of Boks may be involved there, so lots to look forward to. Yeah.